Hey guys, this is Megan, and this is discussion week 4 for COM4413. This week we are supposed to talk about a moment in television where we had a deep emotional response. And I think actually I've had several of these. I think I'm a pretty emotional person anyway, so no shocker there. But one particular episode that I immediately thought of was in season 7 of The Office when Michael Scott leaves and essentially exits the series completely. He came back for a few kind of guest spots, but I think that show, in my opinion anyway, so hinged on his character and his performance um, that there was, the knowledge of him not being a regular on the show going into the show and knowing, like, as a character, this actor is not going to be enriching this ensemble anymore. And he was such a critical part of what made that ensemble great. And so there was already kind of an emotional sadness, I guess, knowing that. But then the episode itself was just kind of a tearjerker because having watched all of the episodes leading up to that, this is episode 22 of season 7. So there's quite a bit of character development, quite a bit of attachment to who these characters are, and an understanding of their nuances and their reactions to Michael leaving. And so I think the two most poignant aspects of this episode, well, let me preface that with Michael throughout the episode is telling everyone that he's leaving tomorrow. So he has, a party planned with all of them, and he's actually leaving that night. So he doesn't really want to go through the whole drama of a goodbye party. But he's trying to have these meaningful exchanges with everyone individually before he leaves so that he still has this, closure of these relationships. And so for me, you would think that the whole Dwight and Michael thing would be really effective. And it was sweet, the way that and Dwight was angry with Michael for not recommending him for a manager position. And so, a lot of the episode, Michael's trying to get back on good terms with Dwight, and they do end up in a good place. And it's sweet, the recommendation letter that Michael writes for Dwight and their little paintball match that they have is cute. But I think the two most poignant arcs in this story are with Jim and Pam, who essentially are the only ones who know that he actually leaves that night when it's all said and done at the end of the episode. So, or at the end of that day in the episode. And just the emotional exchange between Jim, who isn't a very emotional guy on the show in general. He kind of always seems to kind of think of Michael as, kind of this silly guy who's in charge and doesn't really take him too seriously. But their exchange when Jim is letting Michael know, how much he respects him, and just that there really is a true friendship that has developed there over their time working together. And it was just a really emotional moment because you see Jim get a little choked up, and Michael obviously is choked up. He gets choked up a lot on the show. But it's a really meaningful exchange, and it makes you really think about how you almost inadvertently develop deep connections with people, in the office. Just people that you may regularly come in contact with. They may not be your best friends, but there is this sort of deeper that relationship a sort of deeper relationship that builds over time as you, uh, repeatedly experience life with people. And I think that's really evident in that moment. And then the big tearjerker for me is how Michael really wants to say goodbye to Pam, and we know that Michael and Pam have this kind of special um, relationship throughout the series, with her being his secretary for a lot of that time. And Pam has wanted to see The King's Speech, the movie, and so she says she's running errands and she kind of disappears but actually goes to see this movie. And Michael can't find her and can't get a hold of her. And Jim can't get a hold of her once he realizes what's going on because she's in a movie, so she doesn't, have her phone out or whatever. And so Michael is about to leave for the airport, and you can just tell that he was just so devastated that he didn't get to have that moment with Pam where he got to really have closure and say goodbye. And as his taxi is pulling out, her car's pulling in, and so it's like she just missed him. And as I was watching in that moment, I was even like, oh no, he's not gonna get to say goodbye to Pam. And it almost felt like, as a viewer and as a fan, like I needed that closure. I needed him to be able to say goodbye to Pam. And so ultimately what happens is when Pam gets back to the office and realizes what's going on, uh, it cuts away to Michael at the airport, and he's talking to the crew like, hey, let me know when the documentary airs, if it ever airs. And he takes the mic off and turns it into the production crew. And then we see Pam running through security into the airport to say goodbye to Michael. And I think it was even more poignant that at that point there were no mics and we couldn't really hear the verbal exchange between them, but you could just see sort of that deep connection that they had, and the way that they parted was just kind of between them, and it was really sweet and just a really tender moment. And it's amazing how attached you can feel to these characters, especially after seasons and seasons of, following their stories and getting to know them as individuals. And so that particular episode was one that definitely had me in tears and was kind of hard to watch because I loved Steve Carell in the role of Michael Scott. And I do think the series kind of it still had its great moments, but they definitely lost something when they lost Steve Carell from that ensemble. So that was a hard episode to watch, but definitely elicited that emotional response. And that's it for me this week. Thanks.